The quarterback craziness in Stillwater has already begun with a couple current Cowboys entering the portal, a couple guys hanging in limbo. Eric Morris said, "It's okay. Let me bring in 2 more quarterbacks to be ready just in case."
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are we feeling, our Big 12 brethren? Shout out to the regulators. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms at visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now. If you want to jump in the middle of the action, visit FanDuel.com to place your live NFL bets all season long. Give it the bee's knees for all of your betting needs. That is FanDuel. Speaking of the bee's knees for all of your quarterbacking needs, that is our new head coach, Eric Morris. There is not going to be any reservations about the quarterbacks that he decides to extend an offer to. And with the 2 most recent offers, we have to be excited. Yes, a lot of people are waiting on pins and needles with what Drew Mestemaker is going to do. Now that Zane Flores has entered the portal and Mason Schubert's entered the portal, Hauss Hejny has still yet to enter the portal. Drew Mestemaker is likely to enter the portal, but it's not a foregone conclusion that he does come with Eric Morris to Oklahoma State. Yes, that would make the most amount of sense, right? Because before Eric Morris jumped in for Drew Mestemaker, it didn't seem like he was going to have any opportunities whatsoever to play collegiate football. That is easily something that is going to be taken into consideration by Drew Mestemaker, but you are hearing reports that Indiana is already prepared to offer $3.5 million for Drew Mestemaker, right? Originally, we heard the price tag in Stillwater was likely to be somewhere north of $2 million, which is insane to me. But not that he's not worth it. I find it crazy that Oklahoma State University is entertaining paying $2+ million for a quarterback. Well, now it seems like that number is going to be closer to 3. It doesn't mean that we have to match the 3.5 or 3.2 or whatever Indiana may throw his way, but we're going to have to get fairly close. So it's not, again, a foregone conclusion that Drew Mestemaker comes to Oklahoma State. I would put the likelihood at very high, but it's not a sure thing. Just like it's not a sure thing that Hauss Hejny is leaving Oklahoma State. I would imagine so, right? There was a business decision that him and his camp made in this previous season to not come back for the last 3-4 weeks. Completely understand. But at the same point in time, there's a lot of, there's a lot of things that the coaching staff is looking at. One of those is the upcoming talent, right? Again, if Drew Mestemaker decides to go to Indiana or elsewhere, is it going to hurt? Yes, it is. But that's probably why we should have faith in the newest quarterback commit that happened yesterday alongside the quarterback that we signed for this very late class. So let's talk about those 2 dudes. While Hauss Hejny seemingly is still yet to make a decision, and Drew Mestemaker hasn't officially entered the transfer portal, but it does appear as though that's going to happen as soon as their bowl game is over. And we don't know that we're going to get him. So what we do know is we've probably got some developmental guys that likely have the ability to, get us close to where we need to be. But if not, let's talk about one of the 15-man recruiting class that we just signed recently, and that is 3-star quarterback Brodie Vehrs, 6 foot, 185-pounder out of Chandler, Arizona, which is ironically Kenny Dillingham's backyard. He's thrown for 4,447 yards in the last 2 years, 39 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions, 528 rushing yards, with 6 touchdowns and almost 6 yards per carry. He had offers from North Texas, Northern Arizona, Northern Iowa, and Southern Utah. This is a dude that if you look up some of the things that he said about why he committed to North Texas, and it was simply because of Eric Morris. Like, that's all Brodie Vehrs ever talked about in all of his write-ups. Why did you choose North Texas? And it's because of that long list of quarterbacks that have been discovered by Eric Morris. So whenever you look at some of his film, crazy quick wrist flip, very unconventional the way that he can throw off platform. He doesn't require a traditional base to throw. He can flip it randomly without setting up. So while he's on the run, it looks like he's going to run, and he literally just flicks his wrist out there, and it gets where it's supposed to go. He doesn't mind throwing against the grain. He doesn't mind throwing against his body. He doesn't mind breaking out and obviously picking up some yards with his feet, being creative. He's off script, I guess is the best way to explain it. He has a little bit of that Kyler Murray ability to run around and make some crazy stuff happen. And again, he can throw an absolute laser beam, and that is something that's going to be synonymous. Because if you look at the other quarterback that just recently committed, like yesterday, this is Luke Tepas, 6'4", 205-pounder, so a little bit more of your traditional quarterback as opposed to a 6 foot, 185-pounder, Brodie Vehrs. But this Barrington, Illinois product, realistically, if you look at the film, it's a head scratcher. Why he didn't have more opportunities. But then you do a little bit of the digging, and it makes sense. He did throw for 2,500 yards, 27 TDs to only 7 interceptions. He had 343 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. He has a 4.1 GPA. And the reason it appears as though he got severely under-recruited is because he sat behind a guy named Nick Pipert for multiple years. Nick Pipert threw for almost 5,500 yards, almost 60 touchdowns to only like 13, 14 interceptions. So there was a reason that Luke Tepas sat behind Nick Pipert for a few years before he finally got his opportunity. And then when he did get his opportunity, the film speaks for itself. I implore you to go check it out, even if it's just the highlights, right? You look at the highlights of what he can do, and it's more traditional. It looks much more like Drew Mestemaker. He stands tall in the pocket. He's got a big frame. He doesn't get his feet overextended, so too far outside of his hips. He's really good at utilizing his eyes to get defenders to kind of cheat certain ways. He seems to be pretty advanced with the quarterback position. So the fact that he only had an offer from Dayton until Oklahoma State stepped in is very surprising. It seemed as though Illinois was trying to work something out with him, but it would be kind of like a walk-on style of ordeal. Eric Morris said, I don't need this walk-on designation. I don't need none of the crap. I need you to come to Oklahoma State. This is what I need. And this is the guy who, again, not only found Drew Mestemaker, who wasn't starting in high school. He was playing safety and punter, but he wasn't playing quarterback. But Eric Morris saw enough in Drew Mestemaker to say, yeah, that could be my guy. Cam Ward was a 0-star. He ran the triple option, so he only threw the ball 1 or 2 times a game. Therefore, nobody ever viewed him as a college quarterback except for Eric Morris. So Brodie Vehrs being a 3-star out of Arizona, that definitely carries its weight in gold. Meanwhile, it's nice to know that he didn't even play the full complement of the season this previous year due to injury. But he identified Brodie Vehrs very early on as somebody that can fit in my system and do a multitude of things. Arm strength is, again, the synonymous attribute here, because if you look at Luke Tepas' film, you'll see the same thing. He's got a laser for an arm. And some of the layering that you see from Luke Tepas is pretty legitimate. So this is one of those scenarios where, once again, Eric Morris likely has found something in Luke Tepas that nobody else in the country really is looking at. I mean, obviously Dayton found a way to evaluate the talent properly. But whenever he said in his introductory press conference, Eric Morris, don't be mad at me if I go get a 3-star quarterback, which he did. He went and got a 3-star quarterback. But he also probably should have said, don't be mad at me if I go get a 0-star quarterback either, because look at Cam Ward, look at Drew Mestemaker. Those were dudes that I found. Those were dudes that I helped develop. Those were dudes that all the other schools in the country didn't really want. And the only thing I could find on Luke Tepas as to why, because his highlights are crazy, was because he sat behind a starter for a multitude of years, and the starter threw for almost 6,000 yards. That'll do it, right? But more often than not, that'll put you behind the 8 ball. So we don't know what's going to happen with Drew Mestemaker. We don't exactly know what's going to happen with Hauss Hejny quite yet either. We know where Zane Flores is out. We know Mason Schubert's out. So hopefully we get Drew Mestemaker, or there is going to be some uncertainty. But if we don't, we have to just relax, because this is the quarterback that's unearthed all of these NFL level quarterbacks. Eric Morris is that guy. So I don't care if the quarterback is a 2-star, 1-star, 0-star, negative star. If Eric Morris says that guy needs a scholarship, we thankfully get to sit back, relax, and just accept it for what it is. Speaking of accepting things for what it is, FanDuel is the best. And NFL Sundays can move super, super quickly. One big play and suddenly everything's different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as soon as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, and every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. So if a receiver is going to get hot, a defense is tightening up, or the momentum, you can feel it just shifting. FanDuel lets you jump into that moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys start to heat up, and you can bet the next touchdown, drive results, field goal, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, with every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long with FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. If you have the bee's knees for all betting needs, that is FanDuel. All right, now we get to slide into segment 2 here. We just talked about the quarterback position. Getting KD Batman Jones back in this class, absolutely massive. Convincing Rodney Fields to stay, probably absolutely massive. Because Caleb Hawkins, much like Drew Mestemaker, it's not a foregone conclusion that we get the services of the 1,200-yard All-American running back from Shawnee, Oklahoma, to come to Oklahoma State. Because he's from Shawnee, it made sense. It also makes sense that the running backs coach, Patrick Cobbs, who's also from Shawnee, Oklahoma, it makes sense for him to come home too, except for Patrick Cobbs is a very sought-after individual. I know West Virginia is making a major play at Patrick Cobbs. I don't know what kind of money they're talking about, but I do know that they're doing everything that they can to try to convince Patrick Cobbs to head on up to Morgantown, West Virginia, to be an offensive coach of some variety. I didn't say running backs coach, though, because likely it's going to take a little bit of an upgrade because North Texas is not going to want to get rid of him, right? If Jordan Davis is, in fact, coming with Coach Eric Morris, then the dude that is designed to take over everything is going to be Patrick Cobbs. So there's no doubt that Neil Brown is going to do everything in his power to try to keep Patrick Cobbs there at North Texas, because surely the Mean Green would eventually like Patrick Cobbs to take over. If there was an idea that Neil Brown could coach for X amount of years and Patrick Cobbs could be the head coach in waiting, they would probably love that. So they're going to likely make Coach Patrick Cobbs an offer to try to keep him in Denton, because that's where he was an All-American. That's kind of where he cut his teeth. That's where he got his start. Coming from Shawnee, Oklahoma, just like his current running back, Caleb Hawkins. Nobody necessarily, wanted Oklahoma State didn't pursue him heavily. But again, this is Oklahoma State, right? Taylor, the Sports Illustrated writer, he had an article kind of about this the other day. And what Patrick Cobbs has as advantage in Stillwater is the Barry Sanders, the Thurman Thomas, the Ollie Gordons, the Justice Hills, the Chuba Hubbards, the Jalen Warrens, right? That this is a university that has at least a little bit of an argument to the RBU connotation. And Patrick Cobbs knows that. He grew up in Oklahoma, but he also got overlooked at times, much like his running back, Caleb Hawkins. So it's kind of crazy that it feels right that Drew Mestemaker follows Eric Morris to Stillwater. It feels right that Patrick Cobbs is also going to follow Coach Eric Morris to Stillwater, Oklahoma, so he can bring Caleb Hawkins with him. But it doesn't always work out that way. So Patrick Cobbs, if the name sounds familiar, not only was he an All-American at North Texas that rushed for almost 5,000 yards, he also had a long NFL career. He played 5 years with the Miami Dolphins. He also played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He also played for the New England Patriots, and he had played a year with the Saints as well. The bulk of his career, 2006 to 2010, with the Miami Dolphins, where he did get a legitimate amount of playing time. And so that name is probably giving you some nostalgic moments. That's him. That's that dude. Patrick Cobbs was a North Texas Mean Green All-American. They went on to have an almost 8-year NFL career. Now he's taken over at North Texas as a running backs coach, but then he was also the run game coordinator as well this previous season. So that's what I say. If West Virginia wants him and Big Ten schools and whoever else wants him, it might take a little bit of an upgrade career-wise to get him. Because if he's going to be a running backs coach, he's probably likely to do it in Stillwater, Oklahoma, right? That would make a ton of sense. Or if he was going to be given the offensive coordinator job at North Texas or the co-offensive coordinator job at North Texas with a pay raise, that could be enticing because, that's his alma mater. I would assume that Patrick Cobbs would love nothing more than to end up running things for North Texas at some point in time. But we need Patrick Cobbs. Not just because it likely brings Caleb Hawkins, but because of that developmental factor. And we talk about, evaluation of talent and how Eric Morris is like the guru when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks. Patrick Cobbs was able to unearth Caleb Hawkins from Shawnee, Oklahoma, right out of his backyard where nobody else wanted him. And we just got an offensive lineman also from Shawnee, Oklahoma. So we're probably doing everything in our power to make sure Patrick Cobbs comes alongside, but there's nothing been put out yet. That's because Patrick Cobbs is a very hot commodity. So I guarantee you it's not just West Virginia and North Texas and Oklahoma State. There's a ton of suitors that want the services of Patrick Cobbs, and that's why you haven't seen his name pop up, right? But Greg Richmond, that's a name that has popped up that we're about to get into. This has the makings of continuously being in that RBU conversation. If you get a guy like this that has that NFL pedigree, that has the connection to the state of Oklahoma, that has those connections even in recruiting as well, that cut his teeth already at North Texas, that is still super young, I bet you money Patrick Cobbs could still throw on pads, get out there, mix it up, and have some of our secondary not be able to tackle him. So, yeah, the future of running back recruiting would be kicked up a crazy notch if we were able to obtain the services of Patrick Cobbs. But it's not going to be easy. Unfortunately, you would think if you could go through the list of all the Berries and the Thurmans and the Terrys you would think, especially with him being from Shawnee, Oklahoma, but if it was that easy, it would have already been a done deal. Yeah, he's sought after. He's very sought after. It is gift-giving season, and whether you're hosting family or you're just planning the perfect gift or you're just trying to keep things simple and delicious, Omaha Steaks is making it easier than ever. From effortless holiday entertaining to unforgettable gifts, Omaha Steaks delivers the world's best experience straight to your door. And what makes it even better, with Omaha Steaks, you always know exactly what you're getting. USDA certified tender steaks, premium proteins, gourmet sides, and decadent desserts that make anyone feel appreciated. You're going to love how easy it is to gift. It shows up frozen, packed beautifully, ready to cook. The steaks are perfectly aged and insanely tender. It's restaurant level quality at home. It becomes one of your last minute best gifts ever because, it doesn't come with all the stress and you don't have to order sizes and it's not going to get shoved out of sight, out of mind. So save big on gourmet gifts and holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for an extra $35 off. Use the code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That is omahasteaks.com. Make sure you use that promo code COLLEGE to get the best Christmas gift this season. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Coach Greg Richmond is officially back. And it does feel good because it kind of feels like he was utilized as a scapegoat. But there was some grumblings that when some of that transpired, that Greg Richmond was at like some, donor banquet meeting type of things and may have said some unbecoming things about the Brian Nardo defense and how they weren't going to work, and we didn't have the right recruiting for it. We didn't have the right roster for it. And all of that ended up being true. So if he did say it, it kind of stinks that he would be let go essentially because of it. And I get the insubordination thingy, and you can't be talking about your defense coordinator as the D-line coach, X, Y, or Z. But the recruiting has always been good under Greg Richmond. And the last time that we had successful defensive lines were under Greg Richmond. As soon as Greg Richmond left and Paul Randolph took over, it's just been a disaster ever since then. And then you look at North Texas, you have a guy like Clemson transfer, Sadiq Clements. If you can get him to come over from North Texas, absolutely massive. Braden Knox, a kid that I got to coach a few years in baseball. He's a defensive end freshman at North Texas. If he's coming over, that's absolutely massive. He's got the versatility of somebody like a Colin Oliver. And realistically, we need more of this Oklahoma, homegrown kind of flavor. If you cannot get Patrick Cobbs, you have to get a Greg Richmond. And so now it doubles the incentive to get Coach Patrick Cobbs, because if you have another Oklahoma native who understands that this state does provide more talent than nationally people give it, respect for, and that's just because numerically there's not a lot, right? There's not a lot of top end players in the state of Oklahoma because there's not a lot of people in the state of Oklahoma. But per capita, we produce some bad mamma jammas. And if you have Greg Richmond coming home, that likely means a decent number of those North Texas dudes like Clements, like Knox, should probably come on over. From the conversations I've had, that does seem to be the case, that not only is it going to bring some of the North Texas dudes over, but you're going to have guys like Jaleel Johnson and Deshaun Brown that were recruited by Greg Richmond that likely also want to be part of that connection, or at least are intrigued by the idea of Greg Richmond coming home. The guy who brought them here, the guy who helped them originally develop, is now coming back. That has to bode well for the talent that we have at the defensive line spot that have not entered into the transfer portal thus far. Again, Sidney Kafusi, he aged out, unfortunately, but you're not hearing much from Luke Webb. You're not hearing nothing from Landon Dean, Jaleel Johnson, Deshaun Brown. So I do think that if you can, again, this is what most of this offseason conversation has been. If you take the best parts of North Texas and some of the best parts of this roster, including guys like Wendell Gregory, then you have something special. If you throw a Malik Charles into that mix, we have a lot of things going for us. And thankfully, a lot of the foundational building blocks that we love to talk about all the time when it pertains to the defensive line, what we have now is because of Greg Richmond. I mean, yes, there's going to be some of the transfers like Demarion Thomas and Michael Diata that were not in that. Neither was Sidney Kafusi. But some of the younger dudes that have been working, that have been grinding, those were guys that were recruited by Greg Richmond. So I think this might be one of the biggest hires thus far because of that reconnection. And it's not just the defensive line. Coach Greg Richmond had relationships with some of those front seven dudes as well. So you haven't seen like an Ike Essenwoon enter the transfer portal yet. Well, he was there for a lot of the beginnings of that. Gunnar Wilson, another one of those guys who's athletic enough, big enough to play a multitude of positions. Well, now if you have somebody coming in that can focus on the defensive line, and that this is somebody who does prefer a four-man front, he knows how to work within a three-man front. He knows how to excel in a three-man front. But, his bread and butter is four-man. This idea that Oklahoma State has Colin Oliver ready dudes on roster, it's tailor-made for some of the staff to come in and instantaneously be successful. So if Greg Richmond can combine the Deshaun Browns, the Jaleel Johnsons with the Sadiq Clements and the Braden Knoxes, if you can have all that come together, we could be talking about Oklahoma State being a dominant force up front. I know that's crazy to say, but again, You go back to Brock Martin and Brennan Evers. Those dudes, Tyler Lacey, those were all Greg Richmond guys. So the last time our D-line was that good, those were Greg Richmond's dudes with Greg Richmond coaching those dudes. So it's hard not to be excited about this one. This might be the most anticipated coaching decision yet. And we got him. He's coming back home. All right, y'all. That's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State, because you could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor. Hit the like button if you liked it. Dislike if you didn't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. All righty, y'all. Later, taters.